Hey guys, tonight we are going to sink into something quiet, something slow, something that smells faintly of steam and roasted bones. You're stepping into a place that doesn't exist anymore, but you can feel it as clearly as if you were standing there. Hanoi, many decades ago. The streets are dark, the air heavy, and the only light comes from tiny charcoal stoves flickering under metal pots. You can almost taste the smoke already, can't you? And honestly, if you had to stand here in this humidity, listening to the slow drip of water from rooftops and breathing in the thick smell of coal dust, you probably wouldn't survive more than an hour. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle slowly as if your feet are heavier than they should be because the stones under you are wet from a long day of drizzle. You hear it, soft, rhythmic, someone dragging a stool across the pavement. The streets are quiet, almost dead, except for the occasional distant bark of a dog or the crunch of a bicycle wheel rolling over loose gravel. Hanoi at night isn't glamorous now. It's not the postcard city you've seen in modern travel blogs. It's tired. It smells of damp paper and old wooden shutters, and the shadows stretch unnaturally long under the weak gas lamps. But then, there it is. A ribbon of smell so thin you almost doubt it. Roasted ginger, burnt shallots, something sweet from marrow. You follow it because, honestly, what else are you going to do? There's nothing else open and the air tastes like boredom. You pass a woman in a conical hat crouched beside a basket of wilted herbs. She gives you that slow, judging look, like she knows exactly why you're out here at this hour. You're not the first to follow this scent. When you finally find it, it's not much. Just a squat old man sitting behind a rickety wooden table, a pot of broth bubbling lazily on top of a blackened charcoal stove. The pot isn't shiny like the ones you've seen in restaurants today. It's battered, dented, with a lid that barely fits. Steam escapes in lazy curls, catching the faint orange glow of the charcoal. The man doesn't even look up when you stop in front of him. You just stand there for a moment, breathing it in. The air feels thicker here, wrapped in a cocoon of bone broth, star anise, and charcoal smoke. It's so different from the cleaner, almost clinical smell of modern kitchens. This is raw. It smells like patience. The old man stirs the pot slowly, rhythmically, as if he's keeping time with his own heartbeat. You notice his hands, thin, veined, stained slightly yellow from years of handling spices. There's a quiet pride in the way he holds the wooden ladle, like it's not just a tool but an extension of him. You sit down on a low stool without asking, because everyone does. The stool wobbles under your weight, and for a second you think it might collapse, but it holds. The man glances at you briefly, then goes back to stirring. Not a single word exchanged. That's how it works here. A faint breeze stirs, carrying smoke into your face. You cough lightly, and the old man gives the tiniest smirk, so tiny you almost miss it. You realize he's seen this happen to thousands of people before, and it never stops amusing him. Your eyes wander to the pot, bones mostly. You can see them through the rolling bubbles, thick beef bones, the kind with a hollow center where the marrow hides. The broth isn't clear. It's slightly cloudy, with tiny beads of fat shimmering on the surface. It doesn't look elegant, but it smells right. Someone else walks up, a young boy barely taller than the stove. He hands the old man a small chipped ceramic bowl, and the man ladles broth into it without a word. No noodles yet, just the broth. The boy sips, sighs contentedly, and hands the bowl back. You don't know why, but you feel jealous of that sip. The man finally looks at you properly, and for a brief moment, his eyes soften. He gestures for you to wait, then drops a handful of noodles into another pot behind him. The noodles are thin, slightly translucent, and you can tell they were made hours ago. Not perfect maybe, but good enough for 2 a.m. under a wet Hanoi sky. As he works, you notice something else. He doesn't rush. Not a single movement is wasted. Each action feels like it's been rehearsed thousands of times, yet there's no hurry. This isn't fast food. This is time, condensed into a bowl. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks again, and the echo lingers between the narrow buildings. A bicycle rattles past, its rider throwing a curious glance at you as if wondering why you're sitting here at this hour. But but you're not moving. You're not going anywhere until you taste this. The man finishes assembling your bowl and places it in front of you with a soft thud. Steam rises in gentle curls, catching the faint glow of the street lamp. You stare at it for a long moment, almost afraid to disturb it. You take your first sip, no chopsticks yet, just the broth. It's hot, obviously, but not scalding. The taste hits you slowly, like a story unfolding in layers. There's the sweetness of bone marrow, the warmth of spices, and under it all, a faint smokiness from the charcoal. It tastes alive in a way that no mass-produced broth ever could. And for a moment, you forget how tired you are, how damp your clothes feel, how heavy the night has become. You're just here, sipping something ancient, something that's been made in this exact way for generations. You don't say anything, because words would feel wrong right now. But the old man glances at you again, and this time his smirk is obvious. He knows exactly what you're thinking. Everyone thinks it the first time. Somewhere behind you, the drizzle picks up again, tapping softly on the metal roof above. You don't care. You just sit there, hunched over the bowl, as the steam rises slowly, carrying stories you haven't even begun to hear yet, and the night stretches on, patient and heavy, waiting for the next secret to unfold. You lean closer to the pot now because you can hear it. Soft cracks, almost like the whisper of paper tearing slowly. That's the charcoal talking. The stove isn't roaring like gas burners, it's alive in a different way, breathing in quiet hisses as tiny sparks glow deep within the blackened coals. You feel the warmth reaching your knees even though you're sitting a good foot away. It's the kind of heat that seeps into you gradually, like a lazy cat curling against your leg. You notice how the charcoal burns, unevenly, stubbornly. One piece glows bright orange, another still half black, as if refusing to wake up. The old man taps the side of the stove with a long iron poker, just once, and the coals shift, sending a rush of embers glowing brighter for a second. They almost seem annoyed to be disturbed. You rest your chin in your hands, staring at that fire. It doesn't seem important at first, but you know better now. This little charcoal stove is the real boss here, not the old man, not the pot, not even the recipe. Without it, none of this would taste right. There's something about charcoal that gas flames can't imitate. The heat is slower, more temperamental, and it carries a faint smoky perfume that clings to the broth without overpowering it. The old man doesn't even glance at the pot. He knows by ear when the coals are right. You can hear it too now, the soft, steady rolling of the broth. Not too violent, not too lazy, just enough. You shift a little on your creaky stool, trying not to think about how your back aches. This is not a comfortable dining experience, not the kind of place where someone brings you a napkin folded like a swan, but somehow that feels like part of the deal. The old man pokes the coals again, his movements slow, almost theatrical, like he's teasing them awake. Tiny sparks float upward for a brief second before disappearing into the humid night air. You follow them with your eyes, watching them vanish, and for some reason, you feel like you've just witnessed something important, even if you can't explain why. You glance at the pot, mesmerized. Fat globules shimmer on the surface, catching the glow of the embers. A lazy bubble bursts now and then, releasing a faint hiss like a whisper too quiet to catch. You lean in, listening, as if the broth is trying to tell you a secret. There's a young man sitting on the stool next to you now. You didn't even notice him arrive. He's chewing on a piece of grilled bread dipped into his bowl, eyes half closed like he might fall asleep mid-bite. He doesn't talk, and neither do you. There's no need. The stove talks enough for everyone. A drop of sweat slides down your temple. The heat isn't unbearable, but it's constant, like sitting too close to a campfire. The smell of charcoal clings to your hair, your clothes, even your fingers, and you wonder how the old man tolerates this every single night. And then you realize he doesn't just tolerate it, he depends on it. The way his hand hovers over the stove, feeling for heat without touching, you can tell this stove is more than just a tool. It's a partner, maybe even a friend. A faint breeze sneaks through the alley, stirring the smoke for a moment. You catch a different scent now. Roasted onion, charred almost to bitterness. It mingles with the smell of burning charcoal, and suddenly you understand why this broth tastes the way it does. It's not just bones and spices, it's this dance between fire and patience. The old man shifts, reaching for a small bundle wrapped in old newspaper. He unwraps it slowly, revealing a handful of extra charcoal pieces. You watch as he selects just one, holds it in his palm like a jeweler inspecting a gem, and then places it carefully into the stove. No rush, no clatter, just a soft, almost respectful motion. The new piece catches after a moment, glowing faintly, and the broth responds almost immediately. The bubbles pick up slightly, like a sleepy animal stretching after a nap. You smile to yourself. It's ridiculous to think about a pot of soup as alive, but that's exactly how it feels. The young man next to you finally slurps his last bite and stands up, leaving a couple of coins on the table. He gives the old man a small nod, and the old man responds with one of his tiny, almost smiles. The young man disappears into the misty street, and you're left sitting there again. Just you, the stove, the quiet breathing of the city. You look down at your own bowl. The noodles are almost gone now, just a few strands clinging to the bottom. You take another slow sip. You're savoring it, because you know it won't taste the same once you leave. It's not just the broth. It's the heat of this charcoal, the smell of smoke, the soft crackle that fills the silence. The old man pokes the coals one last time, glances at you briefly, then goes back to his rhythm. You wonder if he ever gets bored of this, night after night, but the way he looks at the fire tells you he doesn't. Somewhere behind you, a rooster crows faintly, too early, confused by the artificial glow of a street lamp. The night is stretching thinner now, but the stove keeps breathing, steady and patient, like it has all the time in the world. And you stay just a little longer, because watching those embers pulse in the darkness feels oddly comforting, like listening to someone else's heartbeat. You rest your elbows on the shaky table, staring into the steam as if it might reveal a secret, and maybe it will. The smell seems richer now, deeper, like the pot has decided to trust you enough to show its true self. You watch the broth roll lazily around the bones, and you wonder, what's hiding in there? Not just the obvious marrow, tendon, a few scraps of meat, but the real secret, the one that makes this different from just boiling bones and water. The old man lifts the lid slightly, just enough to let more steam escape. You catch a glimpse inside, and for a second you feel like you shouldn't be looking, like you've just peeked into someone's diary. The bones are stacked unevenly, some almost blackened from roasting, some pale and clean, glistening where the marrow peeks through. Thin slivers of onion and ginger float lazily among them, caramel brown from hours of slow cooking. You lean closer. The smell is intoxicating, sweet, savory, and somehow old. Not stale, not unpleasant, but old in the way an heirloom feels when you hold it. This broth has history in it, layer after layer of careful repetition, night after night. The old man stirs slowly with his long wooden ladle, the motion hypnotic, tracing lazy circles that never splash, never hurry. He lifts a piece of bone and lets it sink back in with a soft plop, as if testing its weight. You imagine he can feel the broth just by the way the bone moves through it. You tilt your head, watching as tiny bubbles rise to the surface, bursting with faint whispers. There's a thin layer of shimmering fat glinting under the light of the single, weak street lamp. It doesn't look elegant, but it looks alive. Someone behind you coughs softly, and you turn slightly to see another customer shuffling closer. A woman this time, wrapped in an old coat 2 sizes too big. She looks like she hasn't slept in days. She hands over a chipped bowl, and the old man fills it silently, as if this transaction has been repeated thousands of times and doesn't need words. She takes a sip, her eyes closing for just a moment, and you can tell by the way her shoulders drop that this tastes like relief. She doesn't linger, she just eats quickly, head bent low, and leaves without a sound, vanishing back into the mist. You stare back at the pot, almost jealous again. You want to taste that exact relief, that same unspoken comfort. You sip your own broth slowly, and it feels like you're drinking something much older than yourself. The old man glances at you briefly, and then, almost as if he's breaking some unspoken rule, he speaks for the first time. His voice is quiet, gravely, like the sound of the charcoal cracking. "Bone speaks," he says simply, tapping a ladle against the rim of the pot. You blink at him, unsure if you heard him right. Bone speaks, he doesn't explain. He just stirs again, slow and patient, his eyes focused on the broth. But as you watch, you begin to understand what he means. Each piece of bone is giving something up. Its marrow, its sweetness, its story, slowly, carefully, over hours. You can almost feel it in the taste, like the broth is whispering to you about the cow it came from, the grass it ate, the fire it's been through. It's strange, isn't it, that something as simple as boiling bones can feel this personal. You notice a large, thick bone floating near the surface, its hollow center gleaming pale under the light. The old man lifts it briefly, examining the exposed marrow. It jiggles slightly before sinking back down, leaving a faint, oily sheen behind. There's a sudden breeze, and the smoke shifts, stinging your eyes for a moment. You blink rapidly, wiping at your face, and the old man smirks again. He's definitely amused. You think of asking him more. Why these bones? Why this method? Why all night? But something stops you. It doesn't feel right to break the quiet. You can feel the weight of time here, the kind that doesn't like being interrupted with casual questions. The broth bubbles gently, almost reassuringly, as if agreeing with your decision to stay silent. Somewhere far away, maybe 2 streets over, you hear a rooster crowing again, this time louder, and the sound feels out of place, too awake for this hour. The city isn't ready to rise yet, neither are you. You glance down at your bowl and take another careful sip. It tastes richer now than it did 10 minutes ago, as if the broth has deepened just while you've been sitting here. Maybe it's your imagination. Or maybe bone really does speak, just more slowly than you're used to. You look at the old man again. He's back to stirring, silent, his eyes fixed on the pot. You wonder how many nights he's done this, how many bones he's listened to. And you just keep sitting there, letting the steam curl around your face, listening to the quiet conversation happening in that pot, a conversation older than words. You sit back a little, stretching your shoulders because you've been leaning over that pot for too long, hypnotized by its lazy rolling. Your bowl is half empty now, and yet the broth tastes different with every sip, sweeter, deeper, like it's telling you a slightly different secret each time. You tilt your head, watching the old man work, then suddenly the question you've been holding back slips into your mind again. Why all night? Why not just cook it during the day? The old man doesn't speak, but he doesn't need to. The answer is in his movements, in the way he tends the stove like a living thing. He stirs slowly, then lets the ladle rest against the rim, his eyes half closed as if listening to something only he can hear. You think about it. Why would anyone willingly stay awake through this damp, sleepy darkness, tending a pot that seems to bubble at its own stubborn pace? Gas burners exist now. Faster methods exist, but not here. Not for him. And then, almost as if sensing your thoughts, he finally talks. His voice is soft, almost swallowed by the hiss of the charcoal. Daytime rush. Too fast, he murmurs, not looking at you. Bones don't like rushing. They open only when they're ready. You blink. Oddly poetic for soup. He lifts the lid, and you feel a burst of fragrant steam wrapping around you like a heavy blanket. You lean forward instinctively, drawn in despite the heat stinging your cheeks. You stare at the pot, trying to imagine what he means. Bones opening. It sounds ridiculous, but when you look closely, you almost believe it. The marrow-rich bones have softened, edges worn down from hours of soaking, and the broth itself has turned a deep golden brown, thicker than it was when you first sat down. It's like time itself is melting into the water. The old man glances at you briefly, then gestures to the pot. You rush, he says simply. You get hot water with bones in it, not pho. You can't help but laugh under your breath, because he's right, isn't he? The modern world loves rushing. Fast food, instant noodles, microwave dinners. But here, this is slow, stubborn, almost rebellious. And then, with a slight tilt of his head, he adds something else, his tone lower now, like he's sharing a secret. Charcoal sleeps with the broth, he says, eyes on the glowing embers. It breathes slow, not like fire from gas. Gas is loud, impatient. This, he taps the stove lightly. This teaches the bones to talk. You smile despite yourself. There it is again, bones talking. You're starting to believe it. You glance at the charcoal. It glows faintly, pulsing like a tired heartbeat. The stove isn't just heat, it's a companion to the broth. A slow, patient companion, whispering warmth hour after hour. You think about how this must feel for the old man night after night, sitting here while the city sleeps. It must be lonely sometimes, but maybe not. Maybe the pot keeps him company, filling the silence with its soft bubbling. A couple of late-night passers-by shuffle past, glancing briefly at the stall before continuing down the alley. One man mutters something about how only crazy people stay awake for pho at this hour. The old man ignores it completely, as if he's heard it 1,000 times before. You sip again, the broth hitting your tongue like velvet. It's not just warm, it feels alive, as if each drop carries the weight of hours. There's a pause, a moment where nothing happens except the quiet breathing of the stove. You watch the steam curl into the air, fading into the darkness, and you feel peaceful. The old man doesn't talk anymore, and you don't need him to. You get it now. This isn't just cooking. This is a conversation with time, with patience, with something older than you can fully understand. And as you sit there, the drizzle outside picks up again, tapping on the metal roof in a slow rhythm, almost in sync with the soft bubbling of the broth. It's as if the whole city is listening to the same quiet song. You grip your bowl, warming your hands against it, and you don't rush your next sip. Not anymore. You take it slowly, the way the old man meant for you to, because now you understand why this has to take all night. You yawn without meaning to, not because you're bored, but because the warmth, the slow bubbling, the steady rhythm of the night, it's lulling you. Your eyelids feel heavier than they should, and you almost laugh to yourself because, honestly, who falls asleep next to a pot of soup? But then you look at the old man and you realize he almost does. His head dips slightly, his chin brushing the collar of his faded shirt, but his hand never stops moving. The ladle circles the pot lazily, the same path it's traced for hours, maybe fate for decades. He could be dreaming, for all you know, his body on autopilot, but he still stirs. You lean back slightly, letting your own eyes close for just a second. The heat from the charcoal stove creeps up your legs, wrapping you like a heavy blanket, and you almost let yourself drift off. But then you catch it, a soft snore. You crack one eye open, trying not to grin. The old man's eyes are definitely closed now, his breathing deeper, slower. But that ladle, still moving, he's stirring in his sleep. You watch, fascinated. His hand swirls the broth with perfect rhythm, as if his muscles have memorized the motion so deeply they don't need him awake. It's like watching someone sleepwalk through a dance they practiced for years. A quiet chuckle escapes you, and the old man's eyes flutter open for half a second. He doesn't look embarrassed. He just smirks, the same tiny almost smile you've seen before, as if to say, "Yeah, I've done this for so long, I could do it in my grave if I had to." You take another sip of your broth, which has cooled slightly now, and it tastes softer, almost sweeter. The fat has settled into the noodles, clinging to them in tiny golden beads. You twirl one around your chopsticks lazily, feeling your own body relax in a way you didn't know you needed. A small movement catches your eye. Just a few feet away, a boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, sits cross-legged on the ground, his head resting on his knees. His eyes are shut tight, and you realize he must have been helping earlier, maybe quenching the coals or running errands. His small hands are still smudged black with charcoal dust, his cheeks streaked from where he must have rubbed them with dirty fingers. He stirs in his sleep, mumbling something you can't catch, and the old man glances at him briefly. His expression softens just for a second before going back to its usual unreadable calm. You look back at the stove, listening to its quiet conversation with the night, the soft hiss of bubbling broth, the occasional crackle of a coal shifting, even the tiny snore of the boy in the corner. It all blends together into a rhythm so peaceful it feels like it's pulling you into a dream. And you wonder, not for the first time, how many nights have been like this for them. How many nights the old man has sat here half asleep, still stirring. How many nights the boy has curled up beside the stove, smelling like smoke and bone marrow. The smell wraps around you again, warm and comforting, and you almost envy them. It's hard work, yes, exhausting even, but there's a strange kind of peace in this life in doing the same patient thing night after night. The old man shifts slightly, leaning closer to the pot, and you notice his eyes starting to close again. His head dips, then jerks back up, and you bite back another quiet laugh. But he catches you looking and shrugs, almost as if to say, "Don't judge. The broth doesn't care if I'm awake or not, as long as I keep stirring." And you believe him, because even half asleep, he stirs with the same slow, perfect rhythm. The broth doesn't complain. Somewhere outside, the rain has picked up again, tapping faster against the tin roof, but you don't move. You're too comfortable, too wrapped up in this slow, sleepy moment. You cradle your bowl in both hands, letting the warmth seep into your palms. Then you close your eyes for just a second. And in that moment, you almost feel like you're part of their quiet little world. Half awake, half asleep, sitting beside a pot that keeps breathing for everyone. You shift slightly on your stool, careful not to make it creak too loudly, because the quiet here feels sacred, like breaking it might wake something you shouldn't disturb. The rain outside softens, turning into a slow drizzle, the kind that makes the air taste faintly metallic. You take a deep breath, and the smell of wet stone mixes with the smoke curling from the stove. Then you hear it. The soft murmur of voices, almost too low to catch at first. You tilt your head, realizing it's coming from the far side of the stall, where two men are crouched close together, whispering over steaming bowls. Their words slip through the night in broken pieces. The train again, leaving before sunrise. Said he lost everything, only had enough for pho. Lucky this place stays open. You sip your broth quietly, pretending you're not listening, but you catch every word anyway. Their voices are tired, heavy with that end-of-the-day exhaustion that makes even laughter sound too sharp. One of them, a man with soot streaked on his cheeks, looks like he hasn't slept in days. The other wears a threadbare jacket patched in 3 different places. They eat in silence after that, heads bent low over their bowls, the steam rising between them like a curtain. You realize they're not here for conversation. They're here because, at this hour, this bowl of pho is the only thing keeping them upright. The old man doesn't join their conversation, but you notice how he ladled their bowls differently. An extra splash of broth, a slightly larger chunk of meat in one. It's subtle, quiet kindness, and you wonder if they even noticed. Behind you, someone else speaks. A woman's voice this time, older, soft, but with a sharp edge of gossip. She sits with another woman, both crouched low on their stools, and their words cut through the quiet like a sewing needle through fabric. Did you hear about the boy? Ran off with the butcher's daughter. Foolish, but they say he bought her a bowl here before they left. You almost laugh, but you hold it back because the old man doesn't even blink at their chatter. He keeps stirring, slow and steady, as if none of this touches him. The night feels alive with these tiny conversations, but none of them are loud. People here talk in murmurs, voices softened by the weight of the hour, like they're afraid of disturbing the steam rising from the pot. And then, out of nowhere, a laugh bursts out, a sharp, quick bark of laughter from a man who just walked up, drenched from the rain. He shakes himself like a wet dog, water spraying everywhere. And the old man gives him a flat stare that could probably silence a marching band. The man catches the look, grins sheepishly, and lowers his voice. You can't help but smirk. The old man hasn't said a word, but somehow he controls the entire rhythm of this place, like a conductor keeping everyone in quiet harmony. You turn back to your bowl, letting the voices fade into the background. It's strange how comforting they are, like a lullaby made of half-heard stories. They talk of trains, of lost loves, of debts and luck and exhaustion, and all of it floats into the steam, dissolving there. You glance at the old man again. He doesn't react to any of it, but you can't help wondering how many stories he's overheard through the years, sitting in this exact spot. Probably thousands, maybe more. But he never interrupts, never comments. He just listens in his own quiet way, feeding them broth, giving them something warm to hold on to before they disappear back into the night. You take another sip, letting the warmth coat your throat. The voices around you blur together now, soft and steady, blending with the crackle of charcoal and the quiet hiss of the broth. And for the first time in a long time, you feel strangely safe, like the night can't touch you here. Not while the stove glows and the murmured conversations keep weaving their sleepy little stories. You tilt your bowl slightly, watching the last strands of noodles slip beneath the broth, and your mind drifts as the quiet conversations fade. The steam curls upward, and for a second it feels like the smoke itself is whispering, just like the old man said. Bone speaks. But bones apparently also argue. The old man shifts slightly, lifting a thick, roasted beef bone with his ladle, examining it the way a jeweler might hold a diamond up to the light. Its hollow center gleams with traces of melted marrow, the edges softened from hours of cooking. Then he drops it back into the pot with a low plop and mutters something under his breath. You're curious, so you lean forward, and before you can stop yourself, you ask, "Why only beef bones? Ever try something else?" The old man glances at you, one eyebrow raised. He doesn't answer immediately, just stirs the pot with the same slow rhythm. Then, after a long moment, he speaks, voice low, dry as the charcoal smoke. "Beef talks long," he says simply. "Pig bones talk too fast." You almost laugh because of how absurdly serious he sounds, but then he narrows his eyes at the pot as if remembering something unpleasant. And that's when the man sitting a few stools away chimes in, his voice muffled between mouthfuls of noodles. "Don't believe him too much," he says, half smiling. "There was a time everyone mixed pork bones, especially after the war. Beef was too expensive." The old man snorts at that, a sharp little puff of disapproval, and doesn't bother looking at the man, but you catch the tiniest flicker of something in his eyes. Maybe irritation, maybe amusement. The man keeps talking, ignoring the silent warning. They say some of the best early pho was pork-based. The broth was lighter, sweeter, but... He waves his chopsticks toward the old man. People like him think beef is sacred. The old man finally speaks again, his tone flat but firm. Beef gives the marrow. Marrow gives the soul. Pork is just polite. You bite the inside of your cheek to keep from grinning, because polite is such a strange way to describe soup. The man laughs softly, shaking his head, then goes back to eating, muttering something about how food doesn't care about rules. You glance at the old man again, and this time he looks right at you, his eyes calm but sharp, as like he's trying to make sure you understand. "Pho listens to patience," he says, tapping the ladle against the rim. "Beef waits. Pork doesn't wait. That's why the old taste stays." It's hard to argue with that kind of conviction, so you don't. You just nod slightly and sip your broth again. And maybe it's your imagination, but suddenly you taste it differently. The slow, rich sweetness that probably did take all night to coax out of those stubborn bones. Still, you can't help wondering if pork really would make it sweeter. And that tiny thought makes you smile. But you don't dare say it out loud. The man with the patched jacket leans back on his stool, slurping his last bite before standing up. He tosses a coin onto the table, gives the old man a small nod, and leaves without another word. The old man doesn't look up, he just keeps stirring, as if the debate about pork never even happened. The pot bubbles slowly, almost thoughtfully, and you watch the way the broth folds over itself, thick and glossy under the soft glow of the street lamp. You wonder if it knows it's the product of years of arguments like this, of choices made and remade, until only this taste remained. You catch yourself smiling again because even now, with the quiet of the night pressing in, people are still debating soup. And somehow, that feels perfect. The old man glances at you once more, just for a second, then goes back to his work. Conversation over. The bones have made their choice, and he's just here to listen. And you sit back, sipping slowly, letting the taste linger as the quiet returns, broken only by the steady, patient bubbling of beef bones giving up their secrets to the night. You shift your bowl aside for a moment, not because you're done, but because you need both hands free to watch what the old man is doing now. He's pulled out a small cloth-wrapped bundle from beneath the table. You lean forward instinctively because you know this is where the magic happens. He unwraps it slowly, carefully, as if he's handling something fragile. Inside, you glimpse small pieces of cinnamon bark, a few cracked star anise, roasted cardamom pods, and something you don't immediately recognize. A grayish powder in a tiny paper pouch. He doesn't look at you, but you're already leaning so far forward you might fall off your stool. You catch yourself whispering, "What's that?" before you even realize you've spoken. The old man glances at you for a brief second, then back to his bundle. His answer is as blunt as the way he stirs. "Family." You blink, confused, until you realize he doesn't mean people. He means the spice mix. He drops the cinnamon first, letting it sink into the broth with a slow swirl. The star anise follows, spinning lazily before disappearing beneath the bubbles. The cardamom he cracks gently between his fingers, releasing an earthy sweetness into the air. And that grayish powder, he holds it for a long moment, almost like he's debating, then finally sprinkles just the tiniest pinch into the pot. The smell changes almost instantly. It was already rich, warm, but now it has a sharp edge, something floral and mysterious threading through the marrow-heavy steam. You inhale deeply, your eyes half closing as the scent curls around you. Not too much, the old man says suddenly, not looking at you. Too much. You kill the bone. You nod as if you understand, even though you don't, not really. But you believe him. This isn't just cooking, this is balance. Somewhere behind you, someone murmurs to another customer. They say he keeps the real recipe locked in his head, doesn't even write it down. The old man doesn't react, but you see the tiniest twitch at the corner of his mouth, half amusement, half pride. The woman with the too big coat returns, this time standing quietly off to the side, waiting for her turn. She watches the old man work, her eyes flicking briefly to the spice bundle. You wonder how many people have tried to guess his exact recipe, how many have failed. You sip your broth again, and suddenly it tastes different. The sweetness of the bones is still there, but now there's a whisper of warmth at the back of your throat, something soft and almost secretive. You feel like you're tasting a story, one passed down through hands that refuse to write anything down. The old man wraps the remaining spices back into the cloth, tucking it away like it's something precious. Then he stirs the pot slowly, letting the new flavors mingle with the old, his expression unreadable. You glance at the bundle again, your curiosity itching. What's in that powder? You ask, unable to stop yourself. He doesn't look up, just stirs. Not for talking, he says simply, and that's the end of it. The woman in the coat smiles faintly, as if she's heard this same answer before. She takes her bowl when it's handed to her, bows her head slightly in thanks, and disappears back into the misty street without another word. You sit there longer than you should, letting the new aroma fill your lungs, your head resting in your palm. You can't stop thinking about that little pouch of gray powder. You'll never know what's in it. Maybe nobody outside his family ever will. And strangely, you're okay with that. Because mystery tastes good in this broth, it gives you something to imagine while you sip. Something to wonder about in the quiet of this sleepy, charcoal-scented night. You're halfway through your bowl again when laughter cracks through the quiet like a dropped plate. You glance up, startled, and there they are. 3 men in wrinkled uniforms, their faces red, their boots splattered with mud. French soldiers. They stumble toward the stall, half laughing, half singing something you can't quite understand, their words slurred with drink. One of them nearly trips over the stool beside you, catches himself with a loud curse, and grins as if nothing happened. The old man doesn't even flinch. He ladles broth as calmly as ever, his back straight, eyes half-lidded. But you notice his grip on the ladle tighten, just for a second. The tallest of the soldiers slaps a coin down on the table with a loud clink and points at the pot. Tross, he barks, holding up 3 fingers. The old man nods once, doesn't answer, and begins assembling 3 bowls. The smell of alcohol clings to them as they sit, laughing under their breath. You shift slightly on your stool, giving them space, but they don't seem to notice you. They're too busy nudging each other, making jokes you don't understand. Their voices just a little too loud for the quiet of this hour. When the first bowl is placed in front of them, the shortest soldier, his cheeks flushed from drink, lifts it immediately, inhaling deeply. Bon, très bon, he mutters, sounding almost surprised. The old man doesn't react, just places the other 2 bowls down with the same steady motion. They eat messily, slurping noodles too fast, broth splashing on the table. You can't help wincing a little, but the old man just stirs his pot, ignoring them like he's ignoring the drizzle tapping on the roof. Then, just as you're about to go back to your own bowl, something strange happens. One of the soldiers, the tallest one, the one who ordered, pulls out a flask from his coat, unscrews it with a dramatic flourish, and pours a splash of dark liquid into his bowl. The other 2 burst into laughter, slapping the table, and the smell of strong liquor mixes instantly with the delicate aroma of the broth. You wrinkle your nose because it feels almost wrong, like painting over a masterpiece. The old man finally looks up. His gaze is sharp, but not angry, just tired. He doesn't say anything, but his eyes linger on the soldier's bowl for a moment too long. The soldier catches the look, grins like a mischievous child, and raises his bowl in a mock toast. Bonne fête à la française. he declares, then gulps it down, wincing at the heat but laughing anyway. The other two follow suit, adding splashes of liquor to their bowls, and for a moment the stall smells like a strange mix of beef broth and cheap alcohol. You glance at the old man again, expecting him to say something, maybe even throw them out, but he doesn't. He just stirs his pot, slow and steady, as if pretending not to notice. But you see the tiniest shake of his head, so small you might have imagined it. The soldiers finish quickly, tossing more coins on the table than necessary. One of them claps the old man on the shoulder in an exaggerated show of gratitude before stumbling back into the misty street, their laughter echoing faintly as they disappear. The stall feels strangely quiet after they leave, like the night itself has exhaled. The old man doesn't say a word, but you notice the way he skims the surface of the broth carefully, almost as if to erase their presence from it. Finally, after a long moment, he murmurs, almost to himself, "Broth doesn't like that." You nod slowly, even though he's not looking at you. You can taste it too. The idea of liquor cutting through the slow sweetness of marrow feels wrong, like rushing a song you're supposed to hum quietly. The old man stirs again, his face unreadable, but you catch a flicker of something in his eyes. Pride, maybe, or just relief that the broth, patient as ever, will keep its secrets no matter what they pour into it. You sip your own bowl again, letting the pure, unaltered flavor wash over you, and you're suddenly grateful for the way he guards this taste, even if he does it silently. The drizzle outside softens again, and the quiet returns as if nothing had happened. Just the pot, the smoke, and the slow, steady heartbeat of a city that doesn't care who comes and goes as long as the broth keeps breathing. You roll your now warm bowl between your palms, not because you need more broth, but because the heat feels good against your fingers. The night is heavier now, the mist curling thicker in the alley, swallowing sound, making everything feel slower. Across the table, the old man sets another bowl down, this time for a young boy who can't be older than 12. His clothes are torn at the sleeves, and his hair sticks damply to his forehead. But he clutches a single coin in his small hand like it's worth more than gold. The old man looks at the coin, then at the boy, and for a second you think he might refuse. But instead he takes the coin silently, places it on the table, and fills the boy's bowl with broth, more than you expect for that price. The boy doesn't notice, he's too busy lowering his head over the bowl, inhaling as if the smell alone might fill his stomach. He slurps fast, too fast, almost burning his tongue, and you feel your own chest tighten watching him. You glance at the old man, but his expression doesn't change. His eyes stay on the pot, stirring lazily, as if this is just another night, another hungry child. But when the boy finishes and tries to leave, the old man's hand shoots out, stopping him. The boy freezes, eyes wide, but the old man doesn't scold him. Instead, he ladles another scoop of broth into the empty bowl, pushes it toward him, and says, almost too quietly to hear, "Drink. No waste tonight." The boy nods quickly, sits again, and sips slower this time, his little hands cradling the bowl like it might vanish if he lets go. You take another sip yourself, and the taste feels different now, warmer somehow, heavier with meaning. The drizzle outside thickens, tapping softly against the tin roof, and for a moment it feels like the world has shrunk to just this stall, this pot, and the quiet kindness that doesn't need words. The boy finishes again, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. He bows his head quickly toward the old man, almost too shy to speak, then shuffles out into the misty night, clutching his thin jacket tighter around himself. You watch him disappear, the sound of his small footsteps swallowed by the wet street. The old man doesn't look up, but you catch the tiniest sigh escape him as he stirs the pot again, slower this time. There's a silence that stretches longer than usual, and you realize this isn't just food for him. This is something else. A promise, maybe. Or maybe just the simple belief that nobody should go to sleep hungry, even if it means giving away more than he should. You shift on your stool, suddenly aware of how warm and full you feel compared to the boy who just left, and the guilt tastes almost as strong as the broth. The old man glances at you just briefly, as if he knows what you're thinking. His gaze is calm, steady, and then he looks back at the pot, his ladle tracing the same quiet circles. You take another sip, slower than before, and for the first time you taste not just the marrow, not just the spices, but something else. Something human, something that has nothing to do with recipes or timing. The broth doesn't just feed people, it keeps them alive in more ways than one. Outside, the drizzle fades again, and the quiet returns, heavy and soft, wrapping the stall in its usual sleepy rhythm. But now you can't stop hearing the sound of the boy's footsteps fading into the mist, echoing long after he's gone. The night feels different now, heavier, like the air itself remembers every story that's passed through this little stall. You sip your broth slowly, the warmth curling in your chest, when suddenly a faint, distant rumble cuts through the quiet. It's not thunder. A low, metallic growl rolls across the street, vibrating through the stones under your feet. You turn your head instinctively, and that's when you see it. Faint orange light flickering far off in the fog, the unmistakable glow of fire. The old man doesn't look up, but you notice his stirring slow just for a second. He knows that sound too. The war has been creeping closer for weeks now. People whisper about it in half sentences, soldiers passing through, supplies running thin. But tonight it feels closer than ever. The smell of the rain-wet street begins to mix with something sharper, something metallic and bitter. Then, just as the sound grows louder, a man bursts into the alley, his coat torn, his face streaked with soot. He doesn't sit. He doesn't even speak. He just rushes forward, coins spilling from his shaking hands onto the table. The old man looks at him for a long moment, then silently begins ladling broth into a bowl. His motions are slower than usual, deliberate, almost ritualistic, as if trying to keep this one small thing steady in a world unraveling outside. You glance past the man, and that's when you notice it. The faint haze of smoke drifting over the rooftops, mixing with the mist. It's not from charcoal stoves. It's too sharp, too angry. The man takes his bowl with both hands, nods once in hurried thanks, and crouches on a stool, drinking like he hasn't eaten in days. His eyes flick to the alley every few seconds, as if expecting something or someone to appear. The old man doesn't speak to him. He just stirs, his face unreadable, but you notice something in his eyes this time, something you can't quite name. It's not fear exactly, but there's a weight there, a tired acceptance, like he's seen nights like this before. Another distant boom rolls through the city, softer this time, but enough to make the metal roof tremble. The man flinches, but keeps eating, his spoon clinking against the bowl too fast, too desperate. The broth smell fights against the creeping stench of smoke drifting into the alley. For a moment you close your eyes, trying to focus only on the warmth in your hands, pretending the night is just like any other. The old man finally breaks the silence, his voice quiet but steady. "Eat slow," he says to the man without looking up. Pho doesn't care about rushing, even now. The man stops for half a second, glances at him, then nods awkwardly and forces himself to slow down. You take another sip yourself, tasting the same richness you've been tasting all night, but it feels different now, like you're holding on to something fragile, something that might not exist tomorrow. The distant rumbling fades slightly, swallowed by the drizzle, but the smell of smoke lingers faintly, curling around the edges of the stall. The old man stirs again, his ladle moving with the same slow, patient rhythm, and for a strange, comforting moment, you almost believe that as long as this pot keeps bubbling, the rest of the world can wait, and maybe that's why people come here, even on nights like this, because for as long as the broth breathes, the city still feels alive. The night grows thicker, the mist curling lower, swallowing the far edges of the alley. You can barely see past the soft halo of the street lamp now, but the quiet is deceptive. There's still life moving out there, shuffling toward this stall, one tired step at a time. You hear it before you see it, the faint clank of metal boots against wet stone, the slow crunch of gravel. Then, two men appear, their uniforms not military, but work-stained and faded, streaked with soot and dust. They move stiffly, shoulders sagging, like every bone in their bodies aches. Railway workers. One of them drops onto the stool nearest you without a word, his hands trembling slightly as he fumbles for coins. The other stands for a moment, rubbing the back of his neck before finally sitting too, exhaling a long, shaky breath. The old man doesn't ask them what they want. He just ladles 2 bowls of broth, sets them down gently, and goes back to stirring. His silence feels heavier than words, like he's seen them too many times to need questions. The first man grips his bowl like it's a lifeline, lowering his face into the steam, His hair sticks to his forehead, and his eyes are so heavy they barely stay open. He drinks fast, too fast, but you can tell he's not tasting it. He's surviving on it. The second man takes slower sips though, pausing after each one like he's memorizing the warmth. You catch his whisper, barely audible. This kept me awake last night, almost fell asleep on the tracks. The first man snorts, not unkindly, but too tired to laugh properly. Better than coffee, he mutters between gulps. You watch them eat, and suddenly the broth in your own bowl feels different. This isn't just food. This is fuel for people who work until their hands ache and their eyelids droop so low they can't see straight. The old man ladles more broth into one of their bowls without asking, topping it off as if he already knows they need it. He doesn't smile, doesn't speak, just pushes the bowl closer, his face unreadable. The first man glances up, surprised, then nods once in quiet thanks before drinking it again. You sip slowly, letting the warmth sit heavy in your chest, and you can almost imagine the taste of the same broth at 3 a.m. on a freezing railway platform, how it might feel like life itself in that moment. The second man sets his spoon down for a second, staring into the steam. His voice is quiet, almost too soft for you to catch. They say some stalls add more salt when workers come. Makes them drink water after, keeps them awake longer. The old man snorts softly at that, still stirring. Salt doesn't wake you, he says, voice dry. Patience does. If they sleep, they need sleep. Pho only keeps you alive if you let it. The men exchange a glance, half smiling at his words, but neither argues. They just eat, heads bent low, the steam curling around their tired faces like a blanket. When they finally finish, the first man drops a couple of coins on the table and stands, stretching stiffly. His legs shake slightly, and you can tell he's already dreading going back to work. The second man lingers just a moment longer, sipping the last of his broth slowly, as if trying to hold on to it before stepping back into the cold night. When they finally leave, the quiet returns, broken only by the soft hiss of the stove. You stare at the empty stools they've left behind, and for a moment, you can still feel the weight of their exhaustion hanging in the air. You sip again, slower than ever now, and you understand why they come here, why anyone does. This isn't just dinner. It's a pause, a breath, a reminder that someone still bothers to keep the broth warm when the rest of the world feels too tired to care. The mist thickens, curling closer to the ground, swallowing the far end of the alley. You rub your hands together for warmth, even though the heat from the stove still radiates against your legs. The pot bubbles steadily, its rhythm almost hypnotic. But tonight, something feels thinner. The broth smells just as rich, but you notice the old man stirring differently, slower, heavier, his ladle scraping faintly against the side of the pot. You follow his gaze, and that's when you see it. The bones look smaller tonight, fewer of them. You tilt your head, watching him skim the surface carefully, lifting out a half-sunk piece of marrow bone that's almost bare. He examines it briefly before dropping it back in, his face as unreadable as ever, but you can feel the tension in his shoulders. A woman arrives, her conical hat dripping rainwater, and hands him a chipped bowl. She doesn't speak, just gives him a tight smile, but her eyes glance at the pot with quiet concern. The old man ladles broth into her bowl as usual, but you notice there's more water than usual, thinner fat streaks swirling on the surface. You can almost taste the difference just by looking at it. The woman sips quickly, nods politely, and leaves, but you can see it in her face. She tasted it too. You sip your own bowl, and yes, it's still good, still warm, still comforting. But the depth is softer tonight, the sweetness of marrow dulled slightly. You glance at the old man, but he doesn't meet your eyes. Finally, as if reading your thoughts, he murmurs, voice low and dry, "Too many people want pho. Not enough bones to give." You tilt your head. "You mean?" He doesn't look at you. "War, rationing, greedy sellers at the market. Soon gone, good bones harder to find now. They sell quick to those who pay more." You stare at the pot again, watching the thin swirl of broth around the floating pieces. It's still beautiful, still smells like comfort, but suddenly it feels more fragile, like something that could vanish if the wrong hands took control of it. The old man stirs again, slower this time, and adds in a roasted onion, letting it sink lazily. "You can stretch the flavor," he says, almost to himself. "Add nukmam, more herbs, roast the ginger longer, but it's not the same." His eyes flick briefly toward the spice bundle hidden under the table, then back to the pot. Good Pho listens to bone first. When bones are weak, Pho whispers instead of singing. You can't help but smile at the way he says it, but there's no humor in his tone. It's the kind of quiet sadness only someone who's done this for decades can feel. You sip again, and maybe it's just your imagination, but you taste what he means. The broth has the same warmth, the same soft spices, but the depth feels like it's trying to remember something it used to be. A young man arrives then, tossing a few coins onto the table. Impatient, he doesn't even look at the pot, just mutters, "Any broth's fine. Just give me hot water with noodles if that's faster." The old man freezes for half a second, then slowly, very slowly, ladles the broth into the bowl, his face blank. He doesn't answer, doesn't argue, but you can see his jaw tighten. The young man gulps it down in a hurry, wipes his mouth with his sleeve, and leaves without another word. You glance at the old man, and for the first time tonight, his ladle stops completely. He looks at the pot, eyes distant, and murmurs, almost too softly for you to hear, "Pho is not hot water. Not yet." Then he starts stirring again, patient as always, as if convincing the bones to keep singing for just one more night. The night presses closer, heavier than before, as if the mist itself is leaning in to listen. You sit quietly, letting the warmth of your half-empty bowl seep into your hands, when a new voice cuts through the quiet, sharp, quick, and strangely nervous. A man in a dark jacket steps into the stall, his eyes darting left and right before he sits. His hair is slicked back, but not neatly, more like he's been running. He drops a coin onto the table, glances at it briefly, then fixes his gaze on the old man. "Quick," he says, almost whispering. "I don't have time." The old man doesn't even acknowledge the urgency. He stirs slowly, ladles the broth at his usual pace, then places the bowl in front of the man without a word. The man picks it up too fast, nearly spilling, and drinks in quick gulps, glancing toward the alley every few seconds. You notice how he doesn't eat the noodles, just the broth, like he's in too much of a hurry to chew. You tilt your head, curious, and that's when you see it. A faint bulge under his jacket, the sharp outline of a ladle-shaped hook tied with rope. It takes you a second to realize what it is, but when you do, you glance instinctively at the pot. The old man sees your eyes, and for the first time, his stirring slows just slightly. His gaze follows yours, then shifts back to the man, calm but sharper now. The man doesn't notice. He finishes the last sip, wipes his mouth with his sleeve, and stands abruptly, leaving a second coin on the table, more than necessary. "Keep it," he mutters, already turning to leave. But just before he steps into the alley, something slips from under his jacket, a small metal container, dented and still dripping faint broth. He catches it quickly, stuffing it back inside, but not before you and the old man see. You glance at the old man again, expecting anger, maybe even shouting, but he doesn't move. He just watches the man disappear into the mist, his face expressionless. When the alley goes silent again, you finally ask, "Did he just steal your broth?" The old man doesn't answer at first. He keeps stirring, his ladle making slow circles until finally he murmurs, "Not the first time." You blink, surprised. You don't stop them. His eyes stay on the pot and his voice is quiet, flat. They think pho is easy, just bones, water, spices. They take a ladle, think they can make it taste the same. He stirs again, the broth shimmering in the firelight, and his next words are softer, almost a whisper. They don't understand. Broth remembers hands. It knows when you don't listen. You stare at him for a long moment, then glance at the pot, trying to imagine how anyone could steal this taste. It's not just ingredients. It's time, patience, the quiet heartbeat of the charcoal stove. The old man skims the surface of the broth, removing a thin layer of fat, almost like wiping away the trace of the thief. His expression doesn't change, but there's a quiet finality in the way he moves. "Let them try," he says finally, almost to himself. "They will get hot water. This," he taps the ladle lightly against the pot, "will not follow them." You sip your own bowl again, and the warmth feels heavier now, richer, as if the broth itself has chosen to stay only here, with the patient hands that coax it to life. Outside, the drizzle picks up again, erasing the sound of the man's hurried footsteps, leaving only the quiet, steady bubbling of a pot that refuses to give up its secrets. The drizzle turns into a soft, steady rain, drumming gently on the tin roof, and for a moment it feels like the whole world outside this little stall has melted into gray. You pull your bowl closer, breathing in the steam as if it's the only warmth left in the city. Then you notice something small but strange, a soft rhythmic creak from the corner of the stall. You glance over and there they are. Two children, no more than 10 or 11, crouched low beside the charcoal stove. One is holding a worn bamboo fan, moving it back and forth over the embers with slow, practiced motions. The other sits cross-legged, his head nodding forward every few seconds, clearly losing a battle with sleep. The old man doesn't even look at them. His hands keep stirring, his gaze fixed on the broth, as if their quiet work is simply another part of the stall's rhythm. The boy with the fan blinks heavily, fighting to keep his eyes open, and gives the coals another weak gust of air. The embers brighten for a second, glowing orange before dimming again. You lean closer to watch, mesmerized. The boy's movements are so careful, so deliberate, even in his exhaustion. Every time the fan dips too low, threatening to smother the fire, he jerks awake, correcting himself. The younger child, the one sitting cross-legged, murmurs something in his sleep, his head dropping onto his folded arms. His tiny fingers twitch slightly, still blackened from charcoal dust, as if even his dreams can't forget the stove. Finally, the boy with the fan sets it down for a moment, rubbing his tired eyes with the back of his hand. He glances at the old man almost hesitantly, like he's waiting for permission to stop, but the old man just stirs, slow as ever, not saying a word. And somehow that silence speaks louder than anything. The boy sighs, picks up the fan again, and keeps going. You sip your broth quietly, feeling an odd pang in your chest. These aren't just helpers. They're part of the process, part of the quiet patience that keeps this broth alive through the night. The rain outside grows louder, splattering against the edges of the alley, but the children don't seem to notice. Their world is this stove, this little glowing heart of heat in the darkness. The younger one finally stirs awake, blinking groggily, and whispers something to the older boy. You can't catch the words, but the older boy shakes his head, his face serious despite how young he is. He keeps fanning, his arm moving in that same slow rhythm as if he knows exactly how much the fire depends on him. The old man glances at them once, briefly, then back to the pot. No praise, no scolding, just quiet trust, the kind built over many nights like this. You sip again, and for some reason the broth tastes warmer now, deeper, as if the quiet effort of these small, tired hands has somehow seeped into it. The boy yawns again, his fan strokes slowing slightly, and you almost want to offer to help. But something stops you. This isn't your rhythm to join. This is theirs, a small stubborn tradition passed from tired hands to smaller, tireder ones. The embers glow faintly brighter under the fan's soft gusts, the smoke curling lazily into the damp night, and you realize you're watching more than just cooking. You're watching a lesson, a slow, quiet reminder that even the smallest hands can keep the heart of a city warm, one tired, patient breath at a time. The rain softens again, turning back into a quiet drizzle. Then the stall falls into that same heavy silence that feels almost like sleep. You lean forward slightly, resting your chin in your hand when you notice something different about the stove. The embers aren't glowing as brightly as before. The soft orange pulse you've been watching all night is fading to a dull red, barely breathing now. The boy with the fan keeps working, but his strokes are weaker, slower, his arm trembling from exhaustion. The younger child has fallen asleep completely, his head resting against a wooden crate, his mouth slightly open as he breathes soft, steady puffs into the cold air. You glance at the old man, expecting him to act, but he just keeps stirring, slow and calm. His eyes flick briefly to the stove, then back to the pot, as if he's waiting for the right moment. The boy fans harder, his movements frantic now, but the embers refuse to brighten. A faint wisp of gray smoke curls from the stove, and you can feel the tension in the air tighten like a pulled string. Finally, the boy glances at the old man, his eyes wide, almost panicked. "Oh," he whispers softly, almost afraid to speak louder. The old man sets the ladle down with a soft clink, wipes his hands on his faded apron, and crouches slowly beside the stove. His movements are unhurried, deliberate, as if he's done this 1,000 times before. He picks up a thin metal rod and pokes gently at the charcoal, shifting it just enough to open a small gap between the larger pieces. A faint rush of heat escapes, and he leans closer, his face lit briefly by the soft glow. Then, almost lazily, he lifts a single piece of charcoal from a wooden box under the table. It's smaller than the others, rounder, almost perfectly black. He rolls it in his hand for a moment, feeling its weight, then places it carefully into the exact center of the stove. The boy leans closer, watching nervously, but the old man just waves him back with a single flick of his fingers. Then, with a soft breath, the old man crouches lower, his lips almost touching the edge of the stove, and blows. Not hard, not rushed, just a slow, steady exhale. The effect is immediate. The new piece of charcoal glows faintly, then brighter, catching the orange light from the surrounding embers. The glow spreads slowly, lazily at first, then faster, as if the entire stove is waking up again after a long nap. You feel the heat shift, stronger now, licking at your knees under the table. The smoke curls upward in thicker ribbons, carrying that familiar faint sweetness of roasted marrow back into the air. The old man leans back, satisfied, and hands the fan back to the boy. "Chum thoy," he says quietly. "Slow strokes. Fire likes patience." The boy nods quickly, relief flooding his face, and resumes fanning, softer this time. His movements smoother, calmer. The old man stands, returns to his ladle, and begins stirring again, his face as calm as if nothing happened. You stare at him for a long moment, amazed at how simple it seemed. Just one piece of charcoal, one soft breath, but the effect feels almost magical, like watching someone wake up a sleeping animal with a single touch. The broth bubbles more evenly now, a richer, deeper sound than before, and you swear you can taste the difference even before you sip again. The old man doesn't look at you, but you hear him murmur, almost too quietly to catch. "Fire listens if you respect it. Rush it, and it dies. Same as the broth." You take another slow sip, letting the taste roll over your tongue, and you wonder how many nights he's done this exact ritual. How many times he's coaxed life back into a stove that was almost gone. And you can't help but think, maybe that's what this whole night is about, keeping small fires alive. One quiet, patient breath at a time. The stove hums softly now, its embers glowing brighter, casting a warm orange reflection on the old man's face. You stare at the pot, and something catches your eye, a faint shimmer at the surface of the broth, thicker now, swirling in golden streaks. The old man ladles up a bone, this one larger than the others, its edges softened by hours of simmering. He holds it for a second, letting the broth drip back into the pot in slow, honey-like streams. Then he sets it onto a small wooden board beside him and reaches for a cleaver. You watch closely, curious. He doesn't chop at it wildly. Instead, he positions the blade carefully, striking it with a single sharp crack. The bone splits neatly, revealing the hollow center, and there it is, the marrow, glistening like pale gold under the weak street lamp. The smell changes instantly, richer, deeper, as if the broth itself sighs in relief at the new gift. The old man slides the split bone back into the pot, pushing it gently under the surface. You hear the broth hiss softly as bubbles rise around it, as though agreeing with his decision. You sip again, and this time the flavor is unmistakably fuller, heavier on your tongue, like velvet. You tilt your head. That's why it's sweeter, isn't it? The marrow. The old man doesn't look up, just keeps stirring, his eyes on the pot. "Bone hides its sweetness," he says simply. "You have to open it, but only when it's ready." You glance at the split bone floating lazily beneath the surface, and you can almost imagine it surrendering its secrets, letting the rich marrow melt into the broth one breath at a time. He lifts another bone then, smaller this time, tapping it gently against the ladle. The hollow center gleams dully, and he shakes his head, setting it aside. "This one's still sleeping," he murmurs almost to himself. The way he says it makes you smile despite yourself. Sleeping bones, talking bones, you make them sound alive. He glances at you briefly, the corner of his mouth twitching in that almost smile you've seen before. "If you don't listen to them," he says, "you just make soup. Pho is not soup." You nod, feeling a little embarrassed for even joking. Another customer arrives, an older man with a long gray beard, moving slowly, leaning on a wooden cane. He sits with a soft groan, places a coin on the table, and waits patiently, his eyes fixed on the pot. The old man ladles a bowl for him, but before handing it over, he does something different. He lifts a small scoop of marrow-rich broth from the very bottom of the pot and pours it on top. The older man notices, his eyes softening, and gives a small nod of gratitude. You can't help but wonder how long it took for the old man to learn this. When to split the bone, when to hold back, who gets the richest spoonful. It's not just a recipe, it's intuition built over a lifetime of listening to what most people would call just boiling water. You take another sip, and yes, you can taste it, the marrow, the hours, the patience. It coats your tongue like silk, heavier than before, but somehow still clean, still bright. The old man cracks another bone, slower this time, letting the pieces drop into the broth with a soft plop. The smell rises again, sweeter, almost buttery, and for a brief moment the whole alley seems to hum with it. The gray-bearded man eats quietly, nodding to himself after every sip, and you do the same, because now you finally understand what the old man meant. This isn't just food. This is bones telling their story, one patient crack at a time. The gray-bearded man finishes his bowl slowly, placing the empty ceramic gently on the table, as if even the sound of setting it down might disturb the quiet. He nods once toward the old man, who responds with a barely perceptible dip of his head, then walks back into the misty street, his cane tapping softly against the wet stone. You lean back slightly, letting the steam warm your face. When the sound of wheels squeaking on wet pavement drifts into the alley, it's faint at first, rhythmic, growing louder until a man appears, thin, wiry, pulling a wooden rickshaw behind him. His shoulders sag under the weight of the empty carriage, his shirt clinging to his back, soaked from both rain and sweat. His hands grip the wooden handles tightly, knuckles pale against the dark wood. He stops in front of the stall, breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling in quick bursts. He doesn't speak, just stands there for a moment, catching his breath, his eyes fixed on the glowing pot, like it's the only thing keeping him upright. The old man glances at him briefly, then ladles a bowl without waiting for coins. He places it on the table with a soft thud and nods toward the empty stool. The rickshaw puller hesitates, then sets his carriage carefully against the wall, sitting down with a slow, exhausted groan. He takes the bowl in both hands, staring at the steam curling up toward his face. On credit again, the old man says quietly, not accusing, just stating it. The rickshaw puller gives a tired half smile. Tomorrow, after I carry 2 more fares. The old man doesn't reply, just stirs the pot again, his face unreadable. You watch as the man takes his first sip, his eyes closing briefly as if the warmth is melting the stiffness out of his bones. His hands tremble slightly, but he doesn't spill a drop. After a few mouthfuls, he lowers the bowl, glancing at the old man. "I'll pay," he says again, softer this time. "I always do." The old man gives the tiniest shrug. Pho doesn't care about money. Just eat before it gets cold. The man chuckles quietly at that, shaking his head, then drinks again, slower now, savoring each sip like he's afraid it might be his last for the night. You notice his clothes are threadbare, his sandals patched with scraps of rope. His fingers are calloused, nails cracked and lined with dirt. But when he eats, all of that seems to disappear. There's a softness in his face, the kind of peace you only see in someone who's been running all day and finally gets to stop, even if just for a bowl of broth. The old man turns slightly, crouches beside the stove, and shifts the embers with the metal rod. He doesn't look at the rickshaw puller, but you can feel the quiet understanding between them, stop the kind that doesn't need words. The rickshaw puller finishes his bowl, setting it down gently, then glances at the old man again. "You ever need someone to carry your stove to the market, you tell me," he says, half smiling. The old man doesn't answer right away, but after a long pause, he nods once, almost imperceptibly, and the puller's smile softens. He stands, pulling his rickshaw handles back into his hands, and for a moment you see how heavy they look against his tired frame. But before he walks away, he glances back at the pot, almost wistfully, then disappears into the mist, his wheels squeaking softly as he moves. The old man stirs again, slow and patient, as if nothing happened, but you catch the faintest change in his rhythm, just a little softer, like the pot itself is humming in quiet agreement. You sip your own bowl again, the warmth sliding down your throat, and for the first time tonight, you feel it, not just the taste of marrow and spices, but the quiet weight of kindness simmering under every bubble. The rain tapers to a fine mist, almost invisible now, but the air feels heavier, like it's holding its breath. You cradle your bowl, the warmth seeping into your palms, when a low whisper drifts through the stall. At first you think it's the drizzle sliding down the tin roof, but no, it's coming from the far side of the alley. Two women shuffle past the stall quickly, their eyes darting nervously toward the street beyond. One of them makes a gesture, a quick cross of her fingers like she's warding something off. You follow their gaze instinctively, and that's when you notice it. A faint wisp of smoke curling higher than it should. Not from charcoal stoves, not from rain-soaked chimneys. Something darker, heavier, lurking in the night air. The old man doesn't react. His ladle keeps its rhythm, tracing lazy circles in the pot, but you notice the boy with the fan freeze for a moment, his strokes slowing. Then you hear it, someone whispering just outside the stall, their voice low, almost trembling. They say you can see it here sometimes. The woman by the corner, she drowned during the last flood, still carries her basket of herbs. The younger child, now awake, blinks and sits up straighter, his eyes widening. He glances at the old man, waiting for him to dismiss the story, but the old man doesn't speak. The whispering grows louder as two men step closer to the stall, sitting just a stool away from you. Their clothes are damp, their hair plastered to their foreheads, and they lean close to each other like conspirators. "Swear I saw her last week," one murmurs, his voice hoarse. "Standing near the smoke. Thought she was a real customer until I blinked. Then, gone." The other man shakes his head quickly, but his eyes dart nervously toward the alley. Too much rice wine, or too little sleep. You start seeing things when you're tired. You sip your broth slowly, pretending not to listen, but you can feel the air shift. The younger boy grips the bamboo fan tighter, his knuckles white, and even the older boy pauses, glancing at the alley's dark mouth. Finally, you turn to the old man, half expecting him to scoff at the idea, but instead he stirs quietly, his face unreadable. After a long pause, he murmurs, "The fire keeps them away." The words are so soft you almost don't hear them. The two men exchange uneasy glances, one of them swallows hard. "You believe that, oh?" The old man doesn't look up, just keeps stirring. Charcoal burns slow, smoke clings to the air. Spirits don't like waiting. The way he says it, so casual, so certain, makes you glance back at the glowing embers. You stare at the soft orange light, at the way the smoke curls upward and vanishes into the mist, and for a brief second, you imagine what it might look like to someone standing in the shadows, a warm circle of light in a city full of dark corners. The younger boy finally speaks, his voice barely a whisper. "You ever see her?" The old man doesn't answer immediately. His ladle traces another slow circle in the pot before he finally says, "Pho doesn't stop for ghosts. People need to eat, living or not." The boy exhales shakily, not sure whether to feel reassured or more afraid. The two men laugh nervously, though it's too thin to sound genuine, then focus back on their bowls, eating faster than before, as if finishing quickly might keep the story from lingering. You take another slow sip, letting the broth coat your tongue, but you can't help glancing at the edge of the alley. The mist shifts lazily, curling in and out of the faint light, and for a second, just a second, you think you see a shadow move where no one stands. You blink, and it's gone. The old man doesn't look up, but you hear his voice again, quiet as the steam rising from the pot. "Eat while it's hot. The night's long. Don't let it watch you back." You don't ask him what he means. You just take another slow sip, the warmth sliding down your throat, clinging a little tighter this time, as if the broth itself is reminding you which side of the living you're on. The mist clings tighter now, thickening like damp cotton, muffling the world outside the small halo of light cast by the stove. You shift slightly on your stool, letting the steam curl over your face as the old man lifts the lid just enough to stir the broth again. The soft bubbling seems louder tonight, like the pot itself has something to say. Then you notice him, another customer stepping into the stall, his movements different from everyone else's. He's not hunched from exhaustion or weighed down by wet clothes. He's precise, careful, almost deliberate. He sits quietly, placing 2 coins on the table without a word, his eyes fixed on the pot with the kind of focus you'd expect from someone studying a map. His clothes are simple but too clean for this hour, his hands uncalloused. He doesn't look a worker or even a regular late-night wanderer. The old man glances at him, then back to the pot, his expression unchanged, but you can feel a subtle tension settle between them, like two chess players eyeing each other's first move. When his bowl is finally placed in front of him, the man doesn't eat right away. He picks up the spoon, lifts a small amount of broth, and studies it carefully before letting it touch his lips. His expression doesn't change, but you catch the faintest glimmer of curiosity in his eyes. He takes another sip, slower this time, then sets the spoon down. You stir on the half hour, he says quietly, not looking at the old man. Not constant. That's unusual. The old man doesn't answer, he just stirs, his ladle tracing its usual slow circles. The man leans forward slightly, lowering his voice. I've tasted pho across the city. Yours has more depth. You layer the spices late, don't you? After the marrow softens. You blink, surprised. He's not just eating. He's analyzing, breaking the broth apart like a puzzle. The old man finally speaks, his tone dry. You ask too much for someone eating one bowl. The man smiles faintly, almost amused. I ask because I respect it. You use more star anise than most, and something else. Something I can't place. At that, the old man's stirring slows, just slightly. His eyes lift, meeting the man's for the first time, and you feel the weight of that look. The man doesn't back down. He leans a little closer, lowering his voice further. I run a stall in GLM. People talk about your broth, say it tastes like old Hanoi, before the rush, before the shortcuts. I wanted to see if the stories were true. You feel a small, sharp pang of tension, like you're eavesdropping on something you shouldn't. The old man tilts his head slightly, his face unreadable. Then, after a long pause, he murmurs, stories don't make broth, bones do. The man chuckles softly, not offended, and takes another sip. Still, if you ever want to teach, I'd listen. The old man doesn't respond, he just stirs again, slow, patient, his eyes already back on the pot. The man finishes his bowl in silence, setting it down carefully, almost respectfully. He places another coin on the table, more than enough, and stands. Just before stepping into the mist, he glances back. You can't keep it forever, you know. Someone will learn it eventually. The old man doesn't look up, but his voice is calm, steady. They can learn the steps, not the time. The man smiles faintly, nods once, and disappears into the fog, leaving the stall quiet again, except for the soft crackle of charcoal. You stare at the pot, the steam curling upward, and you wonder if he's right, if anyone else could ever make this taste, or if it really is something only born here, in this exact rhythm of fire, patience, and quiet refusal to rush. You take another sip, and the warmth tastes even deeper now, layered with something you can't name, something that no recipe could ever write down. The night grows quieter, almost unnaturally so, as if even the drizzle has decided to listen. You cradle your bowl, half finished now, letting the steam rise slowly into your face. The charcoal stove glows steadily, its soft orange light flickering against the old man's expressionless face. Then the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps breaks the stillness. A figure appears at the edge of the stall, a hunched old woman wrapped in a thick scarf, her back slightly bent from age. She walks carefully, leaning on a wooden cane, her eyes sharp despite the tired lines around them. You notice her hands first, thin, wrinkled, but with an elegance to the way she places a single coin on the table. The old man glances at her, and for the first time tonight, you see something different in his eyes. Not surprise, not annoyance, but respect. He ladles a bowl for her, moving just a little slower, almost as if giving the broth time to be perfect. When he sets the bowl in front of her, she doesn't immediately. Instead, she leans forward, inhaling deeply, her eyes closing as though she's judging it with her nose first. You expect her to drink quietly like everyone else, but no. She takes one slow sip, sets the spoon down with deliberate care, and frowns slightly. It's weaker tonight, she says, her voice firm but not unkind. You stretch the bones. The old man doesn't react immediately. His ladle keeps its slow circles, but you notice his grip tightens slightly. Soon ball call team, he says finally, his tone calm. Beef bones are hard to find. The old woman clicks her tongue softly, shaking her head. Pho without strength isn't pho. People come for the marrow, not for colored water. You glance between them, feeling the tension hang heavy in the steam. Nobody has spoken to him like this before tonight. Not the soldiers, not the rickshaw puller, not even the man who tried to analyze the recipe. But the old man doesn't look offended. He stirs once more, then lifts the ladle, dipping deep into the bottom of the pot. He pours an extra scoop of marrow-rich broth into her bowl, the surface now shimmering with tiny golden droplets of fat. The woman studies it briefly, then takes another sip. This time she nods, once satisfied, though she doesn't smile. Better, she murmurs. Still not what it used to be, but better. The old man doesn't reply. He just keeps stirring, his face unreadable, but you catch a faint twitch at the corner of his mouth, a tiny, almost hidden smirk. The woman eats slowly, savoring every bite, her sharp eyes scanning the pot between sips. When she finally finishes, she sets the bowl down neatly and places another coin beside the first, standing carefully with her cane. Just before leaving, she glances back at him. Don't let the city make you rush. If you can't wait for bones, don't make pho. The old man nods slightly, not looking up, but you feel the weight of her words settling into the stall like another layer of steam. When she finally disappears into the mist, the silence returns, softer now, as if the broth itself had listened to her and approved. You take a slow sip, and the taste feels stronger than before, richer, as if her sharp tongue had woken the bones up somehow. The old man stirs once more, quiet and steady, and you swear you can almost hear the broth hum under his ladle, as if it knows it has to prove her right before morning. The drizzle softens again, turning into a mist so fine it hangs in the air like breath. You sit quietly, your bowl warm between your hands, when a new sound breaks the night, the soft clinking of metal against wood, rhythmic and steady. You turn your head and see him, a man balancing a wooden carrying pole across his shoulders, two large metal pots swinging gently from either end. His steps are slow but practiced, the kind of careful balance only years of habit can teach. He stops just at the edge of the stall, setting the pole down with a soft thud. The pots sway slightly, their lids rattling as they settle. You notice the faint smell of broth wafting from them, thinner and sharper than the rich aroma rising from the old man's pot. The man wipes his forehead with the back of his sleeve, glancing briefly at the stall before giving a small nod. "Oh, I'm passing the Long Bien Bridge tonight. Thought I'd stop." The old man doesn't answer, just gestures to a stool. His ladle keeps its rhythm as if nothing has changed. The man sits, stretching his stiff shoulders, and laughs quietly to himself. This smell, even from 2 streets away, makes my own broth feel like water. You glance at the pots he brought, noticing the faint oil stains around their edges, and you realize he's another pho vendor, a traveling one. The old man finally looks at him, just for a second, then goes back to stirring. "Bridge work late tonight." The man nods, rubbing his hands together. "Workers are still up there. I'm bringing them bowls later, but I couldn't pass by without tasting yours first." When his bowl arrives, he doesn't gulp it down like the others. Instead, he sips slowly, eyes closing after the first taste. A long breath escapes him, almost like relief. "Still the same," he murmurs. "The bones speak here. Mine just whisper when I cook. Maybe it's the stove. Maybe it's you." The old man doesn't respond, just keeps his slow, steady stirring. The traveling vendor chuckles softly, shaking his head. I carry this pole all night across the bridge, through alleys. People eat, they smile, but they don't talk about it the way they talk about you." The old man lifts a bone with his ladle, examines it briefly, then lets it sink back into the broth. "People talk too much. Eat slow, carry slow. That's all." The man laughs again, softer this time, and sips another spoonful. "You make it sound easy, but this taste, this patience, you can't carry it in a pole." The two sit in silence after that, the only sounds the quiet bubbling of the broth and the faint rattle of the man's empty pots as they cool. When he finishes, he sets the bowl down gently, almost reverently, and places a coin beside it. He stands, lifting the carrying pole back onto his shoulders with practiced ease. Before stepping into the mist again, he glances back at the stove, his voice low. "When they eat my broth on the bridge tonight, I'll tell them yours still breathes like the old days." The old man doesn't answer, but his ladle slows just slightly, almost like a nod. The vendor disappears into the mist, his pot swaying softly with each step, and you're left with the quiet again. You sip your broth slowly, tasting the layers of time in it, and for a brief moment you imagine the same taste crossing the Long Bien Bridge in those metal pots, warming tired hands under the same quiet sky. The mist thickens again, around the legs of the stools, and for a while the stall is silent except for the slow, steady rhythm of the ladle circling through the pot. You sip your broth quietly, letting the warmth sink deeper into you when the faint sound of hurried footsteps cuts through the calm. A young man appears at the edge of the stall, his hair damp with mist, his eyes darting nervously as if checking to see who's watching. His clothes are too neat for this hour, clean-pressed shirt, polished shoes, yet his face holds the same exhaustion you've seen on workers and soldiers alike. He sits down quickly, almost too quickly, and places 2 coins on the table, his fingers tapping against the wood impatiently. The old man glances at him briefly, then back to his pot, ladling broth at the same unhurried pace. The young man leans forward slightly, lowering his voice. They're talking about you again, Holm. Other stalls. The old man doesn't look up. His ladle moves in its usual slow circle. Talking doesn't change the broth. The young man shakes his head, his voice dropping further. Not just talking, they're sending people to taste, to listen. One of them's been standing at the corner 3 nights now, pretending to eat bread. You glance toward the alley instinctively, but the mist hides everything beyond the soft glow of the charcoal stove. The old man lifts a bowl and examines it, and drops it back into the pot with a quiet plop. His expression doesn't change. Let them listen. They will hear nothing. The young man frowns, leaning closer, his voice sharp now. They're stealing from you. Recipes, techniques. They say they'll open stalls just like this. Some already have. People can't tell the difference. Finally, the old man glances at him, his gaze calm, almost amused. People who can't tell the difference don't matter to the broth. The young man blinks, startled by the response. But don't you care, they'll make money off your name, your patience. The old man interrupts him, voice steady, quiet. Patience can't be stolen. They can take the smell, the color, even the same bones. But they won't wait the way I wait. The broth knows. You take a slow sip and somehow you understand what he means. There's something in the taste, something you can't rush, something that clings to the hours spent in this damp night air, the quiet conversations, the soft crackle of charcoal. The young man exhales sharply, frustrated, but doesn't argue. He takes the bowl when it's placed in front of him, drinking quickly, though his eyes keep darting toward the alley as if expecting someone to appear. When he finishes, he stands abruptly, leaving his coins on the table. Before disappearing into the mist, he glances back, his voice low but urgent. They'll keep trying. One day, someone might get close. The old man doesn't look up from his pot. His ladle keeps tracing its patient circles as he murmurs, almost to himself, "Close is not enough. The broth never lies." The young man disappears, his footsteps swallowed by the damp street, and the quiet returns, heavier now, but not uneasy. You sip again, letting the warmth spread through you, and you realize he's right. There's no shortcut to this taste. Even if someone steals every secret, they'll never steal the time it takes for the bones to speak. The mist clings thicker now, curling around the wooden stools like lazy smoke, softening the edges of everything. You shift slightly, your knees brushing the warmth from the stove, when a different sound floats into the stall, a light, almost musical laugh. You look up and see her. She's young, maybe in her early 20s, her hair tucked loosely under a scarf, damp tendrils clinging to her cheeks. She steps carefully into the glow of the charcoal stove, her sandals clicking softly against the wet stones. Behind her, a man follows, tall and slightly awkward, his steps hesitant as if he's not sure he should be here. They sit together on a narrow bench, close but not too close, exchanging glances that feel louder than words. She places a coin on the table, her fingers brushing his just briefly, and he clears his throat nervously, avoiding her gaze. The old man doesn't look at them directly, but you catch the faintest shift in his expression, something softer, almost amused. He ladles 2 bowls, setting them down gently, and you notice he adds a little extra broth to hers, as if he's already guessed she'll drink slower. She picks up her chopsticks delicately, stirring the noodles gently through the broth before taking her first sip. Her eyes half close, and she smiles, not the polite kind you give to vendors, but the small, quiet smile of someone who's found exactly what they wanted. The man, on the other hand, takes a sip too quickly, burning his tongue. He coughs softly, embarrassed, and she laughs again, covering her mouth with her sleeve. The sound is warm, like a bell muffled by the mist. First time, she teases, her voice low, teasing but kind. He nods, still coughing lightly, his cheeks turning red, not just from the heat of the broth. The old man stirs his pot, saying nothing, but you swear you see the corner of his mouth twitch slightly, as if he's heard this same conversation 100 times before. They eat slowly after that, her laughter softening into quiet smiles, his nervousness melting with each sip. Every so often she leans closer to whisper something, and his shoulders relax a little more each time. When she sits her bowl down briefly, she glances at the old man. "This tastes like home," she says softly, "even if I never lived here." The old man doesn't respond, just stirs, but you can feel the warmth in the air shift slightly, as if the broth itself is pleased with her words. The man finishes his bowl first, setting it down awkwardly while she lingers, taking smaller, slower sips. Her eyes wander over the pot, the smoke, the embers glowing faintly in the stove. For a moment, she looks almost lost in thought, like the taste has pulled her somewhere far away. When they finally stand to leave, she bows her head slightly toward the old man. "We'll come back," she says, smiling. The old man gives the faintest nod, as if to say, "Of course, the broth will wait." They step back into the mist, their voices fading slowly, her soft laugh lingering in the air longer than their footsteps. You sip again, and somehow the taste feels sweeter now, warmer, as if the broth has absorbed that laughter, keeping it in its quiet, patient heart until the next time they return. The mist presses closer now, softening the world beyond the stove to nothing but blurred shadows. You hold your bowl gently, the warmth seeping into your palms, when suddenly the light flickers, not from the street lamp, from the stove. The charcoal glow dims for a second, just enough for you to notice, and the old man glances down at it immediately. His ladle pauses mid-circle, hanging over the pot. The faint hiss of bubbling broth softens, almost hesitant, as if the pot itself feels the shift. A gust of wind sneaks through the alley, slipping under the tin roof, and for a brief moment, the stall feels colder. You glance at the stove, and yes, the embers are losing their steady orange heartbeat, turning dull, smoky gray at the edges. The younger boy sits up straighter, alarmed, while the older one grabs the bamboo fan instinctively, his hands trembling slightly, but the old man lifts a hand, stopping them before they can move. He crouches slowly beside the stove, his face close to the glowing embers, and exhales softly through his nose as if greeting an old friend that's dozing off. The charcoal cracks faintly, a soft sound like old wood stretching. The old man watches it for a long moment, then mutters, almost to himself, "Not now, not yet." He reaches for the small wooden box under the table, lifting its lid carefully. Inside are only a few pieces of charcoal left, their edges chipped from use. He picks one up, turning it in his fingers, weighing it, then sets it back. Too big, too fast for this hour. Instead, he chooses a smaller piece, round and compact, holding it in his palm for a moment before placing it in the center of the stove. But this time, the charcoal doesn't catch right away. The embers hiss weakly, almost resisting, and a faint wisp of smoke curls upward before fading into the damp air. The younger boy glances nervously at the pot, which bubbles slower now, the rhythm uneven. "Bone," he whispers, almost pleading. The old man doesn't answer. He crouches lower, his face close to the embers, and blows. Not a strong gust, not frantic, just a slow, steady breath like a lullaby whispered into fire. You watch, holding your own breath as the new charcoal glows faintly, then brighter, catching the soft orange light from the older coals. The glow spreads slowly, lazily, until the stove hums back to life, its heartbeat returning to that steady, patient rhythm. The pot answers immediately, its bubbles resuming, fuller, richer, like a sigh of relief. The smell thickens in the air, the familiar sweetness of bone marrow rising again, stronger than before. The old man leans back slowly, placing the lid gently on the wooden box. His expression doesn't change, but you notice his shoulders relax, just slightly. He glances at the boys, giving a small nod. "Fire sleeps if you stop talking to it," he says quietly, almost like a proverb, "but it listens if you wait." The older boy exhales in relief, picking up the fan again, his strokes slower this time, more careful. The younger one relaxes too, leaning back against the crate, his eyes still wide with the weight of what just happened. You take another sip of your broth, and it tastes different now, stronger. As if the near-silent struggle between the fire and the old man has somehow deepened the flavor. drizzle outside picks up again, tapping gently on the tin roof, but the stove's glow stays steady, humming softly like a tired heart that refuses to stop. And for a strange moment, you feel it. How close this broth was to losing its song, and how easily it could have happened if not for those patient breaths. You glance at the pot, the steam rising slow and thick, and you swear it tastes like gratitude now. The rain outside grows softer, almost blending with the slow hiss of the pot when a new sound drifts into the stall. A low, curious murmur spoken in a foreign accent. You turn your head and see him, a tall, broad-shouldered man stepping carefully into the glow of the charcoal stove. His blonde hair is damp from the mist, and his boots leave faint wet prints on the stone. He looks out of place here, his coat too clean, his movements too cautious, but his eyes are full of fascination. He sits slowly, almost nervously, and places a few coins on the table. His Vietnamese is broken, but polite. "One bowl, please." The old man nods once, ladling the broth with his usual slow, patient rhythm, placing the steaming bowl in front of him. The foreigner stares at it for a long moment, his face lighting up as the steam curls toward him. "It smells beautiful," he murmurs, half to himself. Then, picking up the spoon awkwardly, he takes a careful sip, his eyes widen. He doesn't speak for a moment, just stares at the bowl as if it's telling him a story. Then, after a thoughtful pause, he glances up at the old man, smiling sheepishly. "I cook in France soup, but this is different. How?" The old man keeps stirring, his expression unreadable. "Bones, fire, time." The foreigner laughs softly, shaking his head. "No more than that. I taste cinnamon. And he frowns, trying to find the word. Star-shaped, star anise, yes, but also something buttery, marrow." The old man doesn't answer, just lifts a bone briefly, tapping it against the ladle before letting it sink back into the pot. The foreigner leans forward, fascinated. "You roast the bones first, yes. In my country, we boil quick, but this takes hours." The old man finally looks at him, his gaze calm, steady. "Boil quick, you get water. Wait long, you get pho." The foreigner chuckles at that, nodding as if he's just been handed a great secret. I see. Slow is love." He takes another sip, slower this time, savoring it, his expression softening. Then, as if struck by sudden inspiration, he reaches into his coat pocket and pulls out a small wrapped square of butter. He hesitates, holding it over the bowl, glancing at the old man like a child asking permission. The old man narrows his eyes slightly, shaking his head once, firm but not unkind. "No." The foreigner laughs, tucking the butter back into his pocket, his cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "I thought maybe creamier." The old man stirs his pot, voice flat but not unkind. "Broth already speaks, don't make it shout." The foreigner laughs again, softer this time, nodding with quiet respect. Yes, I understand." He finishes his bowl slowly, almost reverently, placing the spoon down with care when he's done. He stands, leaving a few extra coins on the table, and bows his head slightly. "Mercy. Come on, one day. I try again, slowly." The old man nods just once, his ladle tracing its quiet circles as usual. The foreigner steps back into the mist, his boots splashing softly in the wet street. You imagine him walking away, already tasting this broth in his mind, already wondering how he could ever explain to his countrymen that this isn't just soup. You sip again, letting the warmth fill you, and you realize the old man's right. Some things don't need butter, cream, or fancy tricks. They just need patience, fire, and time. The mist seems thinner now, as if the night itself is leaning closer, listening to the quiet heartbeat of the stove. You hold your bowl between your palms, savoring the slow curl of steam when a new sound reaches you, a low hum, almost like someone singing under their breath. You turn your head, and there he is, a younger man than most who come here, maybe in his early 30s, his hair messy from the drizzle. His shirt sleeves are rolled up, and there's a restless energy in the way he moves, like he doesn't belong to this slow, patient night. He steps into the stall, places 3 coins on the table with a small thud, and sits down, his legs bouncing slightly as he waits. The old man glances at him briefly, then ladles the broth with his usual unhurried rhythm, ignoring the man's impatience. When the bowl is set down, the man stares at it for a moment, then grins. "Smells like success," he says, almost to himself. You raise an eyebrow, curious, and he catches you looking, flashing a quick smile. "I'm opening my own stall," he explains casually. "Not like this. Bigger, Tables, chairs, a signboard, maybe even a radio. People don't want to crouch on stools anymore. They want comfort. The old man doesn't respond, his ladle moving in the same slow, patient circles. The young man takes his first sip, nodding appreciatively. Perfect, he says, tapping the side of the bowl lightly. This is what people will pay for. I'll make it just like this. The ladle stops for a fraction of a second, barely noticeable, but you catch it. The old man looks at him, his eyes calm but sharper now. Just like this. The young man grins. Why not? Bones, spices, slow cooking. I can do that. Maybe faster even. A few shortcuts. But the taste? People won't know the difference. The old man's expression doesn't change, but his voice is quieter, heavier. People may not know, but the broth will. The young man laughs slightly, waving the words off. Broth doesn't care who makes it. It's just soup. The air shifts at that, and even the younger boy sitting near the stove glances up, his fan pausing mid-stroke. The old man doesn't answer immediately. He just stirs slowly, the ladle moving in soft circles, the steam rising thicker as if the pot itself has taken offense. Finally he murmurs, his tone flat. Soup fills the stomach. Pho remembers who waits for it. The young man frowns slightly, unsure how to respond, but shrugs and keeps eating. He slurps quickly, finishing faster than anyone else tonight, and wipes his mouth with the back of his hand. Shortcut or not, he says, standing, people will still eat. The old man doesn't look up, just keeps stirring. Then feed them soup, but don't call it pho. The young man hesitates for a moment, as if the words sting more than he expected, then picks up his coins and leaves without another word. The mist swallows him quickly, his footsteps fading fast, leaving only the soft crackle of charcoal behind. You sip your own bowl again, the taste thicker now, almost defiant, as if the broth itself had chosen to agree with the old man. And for the first time tonight, you understand. This isn't just about feeding people. It's about memory, about patience, about something that refuses to be rushed, no matter how many shortcuts the world tries to take. The mist hangs low, curling lazily through the alley, and the night feels softer now, slower, like the city itself is starting towards sleep. You cradle your bowl, its warmth steady in your hands, when a sound unlike any other tonight drifts into the stall. The slow, deliberate ring of a bicycle bell. You glance toward the alley, and there he is, a man riding an old black bicycle, its metal frame dull with age. A woven basket is strapped to the back, lined with neatly arranged bunches of fresh herbs, basil, sawtooth coriander, mint, and something else you can't name. The green is vivid even under the mist, droplets of water clinging to every leaf. He stops in front of the stall, leaning the bike gently against the wall. His hands are rough and calloused, but the way he lifts the basket is almost reverent. He places it near the table, nodding once toward the old man. The old man glances at him, and for the first time tonight, you see the faintest smile crease his face. Fresh? He asks simply. The herb seller grins, showing teeth as worn as his bicycle. Picked an hour ago before the rain. The old man nods, reaching into the basket, his fingers brushing the herbs with quiet care. He lifts a bunch of basil, shaking off the stray droplets, and the aroma bursts immediately into the air. Bright, sharp, clean, cutting through the heavier sweetness of the broth. The younger boy, curious, leans closer, inhaling deeply. The herb seller chuckles. Smell that, little one. That's what keeps the broth awake. The old man doesn't answer, just begins tearing a few leaves carefully, dropping them into a separate small pot beside the main broth. He doesn't rush, doesn't add too much, just enough for the aroma to blend softly into the steam. The herb seller watches him work, his grin softening. People forget the herbs. They drown everything in broth now. No respect for the leaves. The old man's ladle circles slowly, his voice quiet. Leaves don't shout, they whisper. But the broth listens. You sip your own bowl, and for the first time tonight, you notice it clearly. The faint, clean edge of basil cutting gently through the marrow's richness, balancing it, lifting it. It's not loud, it's subtle, like a soft breeze you only notice when it's gone. The herb seller takes a small bowl for himself, sprinkling a few fresh leaves on top before sipping. He exhales contentedly, his shoulders relaxing. Still the best, he says, almost to himself. Even when bones are scarce, even when the city rushes, you still wait for the leaves. The old man doesn't respond, but his ladle slows slightly, almost like acknowledgement. When the herb seller finishes, he stands, lifting his basket onto his back again. He gives the old man a small nod. "I'll come again before sunrise, if the rain doesn't flood the roads." The old man glances at the basket, then at him. "Bring the sawtooth first. The others can wait." The herb seller grins, nods once more, and wheels his bicycle slowly into the mist, the faint squeak of its pedals fading into the drizzle. You sip again, tasting the soft brightness lingering under the deeper layers of bone and spice, and you realize how easy it is to overlook the leaves. But here, in this quiet stall, even the smallest whisper gets the patience it deserves. The night feels older now, heavier, as if every story whispered into this stall has settled into the steam rising from the pot. You sit quietly, your bowl almost empty, when a new sound slips through the mist. A slow, uneven tapping, like someone testing the ground with each step. A man emerges from the fog, thin as the bamboo poles stacked behind the stall. His clothes hang loosely on him, patched in too many places to count, and his hair is streaked with gray that catches the faint glow of the stove. But his eyes are sharp, bright, alive despite the wear on his body. He leans on a wooden crutch, his left leg stiff, dragging slightly with every step. When he reaches the stall, he lowers himself carefully onto a stool, exhaling a long breath, as if the act of sitting itself is a small victory. The old man doesn't ask questions. He simply ladles a bowl, setting it down gently. The man stares at it for a long moment before finally speaking, his voice hoarse but steady. "It still smells the same." The old man's ladle pauses for a second, then continues its slow circle. His face stays unreadable, but you catch the slightest flicker of recognition in his eyes. The man takes his first sip slowly, closing his eyes as if pulling memories out of the broth. A quiet smile softens his tired face. "Years ago, before I left for the border, I sat on this same stool, same smell, same smoke." You glance at the old man, curious, but he keeps stirring, saying nothing. The man takes another sip, his hand steadying slightly as the warmth spreads through him. "I thought about this taste every night, in the cold, in the mud, even when the gunfire stopped. I promised myself I'd come back just to see if it was real or only in my head." The old man finally speaks, his voice quiet, almost flat. "And now?" The man smiles faintly, his eyes still on the bowl. "Now I know I wasn't dreaming." The old man doesn't reply, but his ladle slows almost imperceptibly, like a silent acknowledgement of what those words mean. The man eats slowly, savoring every bite, his crutch leaning against the table. When he finishes, he sets the bowl down gently, almost reverently, and places a single worn coin on the table. The old man glances at it but doesn't move to take it. "Keep it," he says simply. The man hesitates, then pushes it closer. "I paid for this bowl before years ago. This is for that one. It's late, but I kept my promise too." The old man looks at him for a long moment, then nods once, taking the coin and placing it quietly into a wooden box beneath the table. The man stands slowly, leaning on his crutch, and gives the old man a small, respectful bow. "Don't stop making it long. Some of us still need to taste the old Hanoi to remember why we came back." The old man says nothing, just stirs the pot, but you can feel something shift in the air, a quiet weight settling over the stall like a soft blanket. The man disappears into the mist, his crutch tapping against the wet stone, the sound fading slowly into the drizzle. You sip your broth again, and somehow it tastes heavier now. Not sad, but deep, as if carrying not just the marrow of bones, but the marrow of lives lived and returned. The pot bubbles steadily, patient as ever, waiting for the next story to step out of the mist. The night has stretched thin now, that strange hour when it feels like time itself holds its breath. The mist hangs lower, softer, curling around the glowing stove like it doesn't want to leave. You sit still, your bowl nearly empty, listening to the quiet crackle of the charcoal as it hums its slow, steady song. The old man stirs without hurry, his ladle tracing circles that feel older than this street, older than the city itself. The boys have grown quiet too. The younger one leans against the crate, fighting sleep while the older keeps fanning the embers gently, his strokes soft and careful like rocking a baby back to sleep. The stall is empty now. No soldiers, no lovers, no tired workers. Just you, the boys, and the old man. Even the drizzle has faded to a faint mist, more memory than rain. You take a slow sip, letting the last bit of broth linger on your tongue, And for the first time tonight, you notice how different it feels. Not just richer, not just warm, but alive, as if the pot itself has been collecting every whisper, every laugh, every sigh that passed through this stall tonight. The old man lifts a bone from the pot, holding it in his ladle for a moment. It's clean now, stripped of marrow, pale against the golden broth. He looks at it briefly, then drops it back into the pot with a soft plop. Tomorrow, he murmurs almost to himself, new bones will talk. You tilt your head, watching him. And the old ones, you ask softly. He glances at you, his expression unreadable, then back to the pot. Old bones rest, but they leave their story here. You look at the steam curling upward, and you can almost believe it. The idea that this broth holds all those stories now, each bubble a quiet memory. The rickshaw puller's tired smile, the young lover's laughter, the soldier's quiet promise, even the stubborn pride of other vendors trying to copy what they can never quite steal. The old man stirs again, slower this time, almost lazily. His eyes half-lidded, like he's finally letting the night settle into his bones, too. The boys have given up trying to stay awake. The younger one sleeps with his head on his folded arms, and the older's fan strokes slow until they stop, his chin dipping to his chest. The pot keeps bubbling anyway, steady and patient, its rhythm unbroken. The old man glances at you once more, and for the first time tonight you see him smile. Not the faint twitch of his mouth you've seen before, but a real soft smile, almost hidden under the shadows of the stove light. Eat slow, he says quietly. This is the last bowl for tonight. Let it stay with you. You take your final sip, and it tastes different now, almost like it's saying goodbye. The marrow, the spices, the soft whisper of herbs, all of it blends into something so warm, so quiet, you feel it lingering in your chest long after you swallow. The mist outside glows faintly as the first thin light of dawn creeps into the alley. You set your empty bowl down gently, almost reluctantly, and stand. The old man doesn't say anything else. He just stirs the pot one last time, his ladle making slow, tired circles, as if tucking the broth in for its own sleep. You step into the soft gray morning, the faint hum of the stove fading behind you, and for a moment as the mist curls around your shoulders, you swear you can still hear it. The quiet heartbeat of the broth, whispering stories that will start all over again when the night returns. End of script. Sweet dreams.